it's very exciting to be here. Great turnout. Thanks so much for giving us the opportunity to participate in this event. What we're going to talk about today is the changing role of brand in healthcare. Healthcare is different than other industries. Very often we see there's a lag in healthcare, 5 or 10 years behind other industries, and brand development is no different. So what we want to do this evening, or what today or tonight is about, is first off, explain to you InterbrandHealth's philosophy on why brand in the healthcare space is different. And then talk about how the role of brand in the healthcare space is beginning to evolve. So to give you a little bit of background, so InterbrandHealth. Interbrand is the world's largest brand consultancy. We have offices in 36 offices around the world and over 1,200 employees. Within Interbrand, there's a boutique group dedicated specifically to the health and healthcare industry. That would be InterbrandHealth. And there's about 50 of us around the world, and our sole purpose is to develop brands and manage brands for the healthcare industry. At Interbrand, philosophically, we believe that all brands are built on a big idea. At Interbrand, our big idea is that brands have the power to change the world. And then in healthcare, we take it a step further, that brands have the power to change lives. And you can see some of the iconic brands we've worked on, from naming Viagra to doing a lot of corporate work. It's not listed here. We were actually heavily involved when Merck acquired Schering-Plough and looking at the corporate brand strategy for that acquisition. But again, everything we do is focused on healthcare. So what is a brand? What I can tell you is what a brand is not. A brand is not a trademark. A brand is not a logo. At Interbrand and InterbrandHealth, we view brand as an economic asset. That if managed correctly, a strong brand will engender loyalty, create value, and ultimately drive choice and demand. The best way to exhibit that is a simple example. So here we have 2 cups of coffee. On the left is the standard cup that you would get at your local coffee cart or local deli. It's good quality, it's excellent flavor, it's cheap, but it's not branded. On the right, we have everybody's favorite or least favorite, Starbucks, where there are many of us that either walk past the coffee cart every day and go into Starbucks and pay $3, $4 for a similar cup of coffee. So why do we do that? Well, Starbucks is a brand. We have an experience with that. We expect an experience. We can go anywhere in the world and get a cup of coffee from Starbucks and have that similar experience. And that's the point. A brand creates an experience with a customer. It also commands a premium. One of the things we're going to talk a lot about today is valuing brand, or brand value. And what brand value actually measures is the current and future earnings attributable to brand. So again, a brand is not, it's not fluff. It's a business asset that allows us to quantify the impact, or it's an asset for you to drive revenues and growth for your organization. And at Interbrand, one of the things we've done is we've actually pioneered a methodology to measure brand value. Every year, Interbrand releases the best global brands. And we just released the 2011 version this past October. And again, this is a methodology that actually puts a tangible financial value on an intangible asset like a brand. Now, I don't know if anybody has seen this, and definitely want to make this a little more interactive, not just me speaking the whole time, but if anybody would want to venture a guess as to what do you think is the most valuable brand in the world today?
Apple.
Yeah, Apple, we have Coke.
Google.
Well, somebody is right. It's actually Coke. Any guesses on how much the Coca-Cola brand is worth these days? 16 billion. One higher. It's actually worth between 71 and 72 billion dollars. That means current and future revenues attributable to brand or branded revenues, $72 billion. So what I wanted to show, so here are the top 10 global brands as analyzed by us. So top of the list is Coca-Cola. But you can see here, I mean, a lot of, Apple's top of the list, McDonald's, I think there was a Google, maybe I don't know. But you can see some pretty iconic brands. One thing you'll notice here, though, no healthcare brands. And that's to be somewhat expected. I mean, again, these top 10 in the world, big brands. So let's take it a step further. This is the top 100. And for Johnson & Johnson, number 83, congratulations. So again, a lot of iconic corporate brands on this list, but there's kind of a common theme that you'll see. We've actually analyzed or grouped the best global brands by sector. Financial services, holding on by a thread at the top. But again, you can see there's electronics, automotive, all the way down the list, energy, sporting goods. But I mean, to cut to the punchline, traditional healthcare and pharma brands, 0. So what's the dynamic there? Why is this the case? Well, we've studied this, and what we've found is that historically, the role of brand in the healthcare space has been way down here with bulk chemicals. And again, role of brand, the amount of earnings that are driven by branded revenue. It makes sense when you think about perfumes, luxury goods, role of brand is quite high. That drives a purchase decision. Think about the equities or the associations with Tiffany's. When you're looking to get engaged and your significant other sees that blue box. Brand drives that choice. We're not there yet in healthcare. Philosophically, and if there's one major takeaway or one philosophical thing you get out of this, is that we believe that brand is the most underutilized business asset in the healthcare sector. That this is a missed opportunity for the industry. That they're leaving revenues, demand on the table. Ultimately, what we believe is that there's an opportunity to redefine the role of brand in healthcare. And you can see that illustrated here. So again, there's an opportunity for brands to play a bigger role in driving purchase decisions. What we're going to do tonight is talk about that a little bit. So let me pose another question, because I know we have a mix of people in the audience here. So why do you think brand is different in our industry? What about brand is different? Sure.
Science-based and marketed primarily to doctors.
Okay. Any others?
And the consumer doesn't always choose the brand.
Terrific.
Quick question. When you say healthcare, what is your definition of healthcare? You're talking about pharmaceuticals, or are you including hospitals? You see a lot of in the firms that are marketing to the pharmaceutical industry, you differentiate healthcare meaning basically care providers versus life sciences, which they're targeting as pharmaceuticals.
It's a great question. This evening's conversation will focus primarily on pharma, but we believe the role of brand actually across the health and life sciences industry is underleveraged. So any other reasons why brand is different in our industry?
Because there's a standard expectation that everything must work to a certain types of sufficiency,
Okay.
so that there's no need for stratification or tier of what's better than the others. So
Okay.
if equity approves it, it's supposed to work, unless it was a targeted expectation.
Okay. So very fun. Oh, good participation.
Well, I mean, partly if you're taking a healthcare product, like you must already have been sick or something like that. And so if Coke have a recall,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily mean that someone's going to die. If you
Good.
don't have a recall, someone could, it could be a lot more life-threatening. So it's difficult to love a brand that's giving you life.
You guys must have flipped ahead. This is really good. One more.
Mine's expired.
Okay.
People want to say I'm on Lipitor as my drug, as opposed to whatever else, but because it's not, the company's still there, but the drug is no longer has the same value.
Terrific. So good, you touched on a lot of themes that we're actually prepared to talk about, which is always helpful. So first and foremost, I mean, I think there were a couple of responses around this that, in general, we have a very complex set of audiences that we're speaking to. We have a payer group who are, as we know, increasing in power and influence, given healthcare reform and everything else that's going on, especially in this country. They're incentivized to drive down costs and also demonstrate value. We have physicians who are, I can tell you, don't like being told what to prescribe by the payers and have their prescribing decisions influenced by that, as well as having a number of different options to choose from. And then you have the consumers, which I forget who said it, but yeah, it's not too exciting to go to your doctor and get a script for your Lipitor or anything like that. I mean, we're selling to consumers things that they don't necessarily want. It's not like the excitement of going to buy a new car or television. So it's a very different purchase dynamic. Another reason, and to just take a quick deviation here, is the brand model itself. So here are just 4 brand architecture models that just in general companies can pursue when organizing their brands. So the first is the freestanding model. This is again where the product or service stands on its own. This is the P&G or Unilever model. The endorsed and overbrand model, this is where the corporate brand provides some level of endorsement, or again, is in the overbrand model, sits kind of side by side with the product brand. And then the master brand, this is where there's one brand to identify all products and services. So this would be the GE model, this would be Virgin, things like that. So historically, pharma has adopted a freestanding product model. And there are a couple of reasons for that. Number one, risk mitigation. There was a desire that if one of your products failed or there was a recall or things like that, we want to separate that from our corporate brand. The second is just in terms of audience expectations. For a very long time, efficacy and safety were good messages, very functional messages. That was all that was needed to sell a product. That's evolving. And the third is the efficient marketing itself. So touched on the point that you had that blockbuster model, that primary care model for a very long time, where it was actually more efficient to put your equities or put your investment into a particular product brand because it's going to be sold to the masses on the billions of dollar level. So again, the brand model itself is a little bit different versus other industries where you see more of a mix of all this. And then the third, which was slightly touched on, and of course there are others, but for the purpose of everybody's sanity, we focused on 3. Regulations. So regulations impact brand building and promotional efforts, from what you can call your drug name, and what it says, to fair balance in television ads in the United States, or fair balance if you want to do or list a banner ad online. I mean, these are all considerations that we as an industry need to factor in that other industries don't necessarily need to deal with. So the next question here is, what's actually changing in the health and life sciences industry? What's different? Or what's happening? What are the trends?
You touched on the primary care model isn't really effective as much going forward, so that there's now specialty is the model, and you need to have more of a robust interaction with fewer people.
Okay. Sure.
Generics?
Generics are entering the market. Okay, great.
Two things. On the political end, there are Healthcare Reform Act is going to change healthcare, and I think that subsequently will drive us to consider wellness and prevention more now than curative.
Okay.
States are getting tighter on the spend, for each physician. Massachusetts, great example. Plus the Sunshine Act, which is now coming up, is going to have a huge impact on it.
Good. All right, one more.
More costs is being shifted to the consumer, patient.
Good. Absolutely. All great points. So one of the things, you touch on some of these, and one of the big things, at least from the pharma side, is that we're continually challenged by a slew of reorganizations, both internally and externally. So there's been a huge amount of M&A activity, reorganization, things like that, from Merck acquiring Schering-Plough, Pfizer and Wyeth, Roche Genentech. I mean, a host of big mergers or acquisitions that have taken place. And change is the norm. I mean, the business model itself is changing. I mean, looking specifically, at pharma. I mean, there's diversification, we're increasing scale and reach on a global basis or a geographic basis. There's a focus on productivity. I mean, a really big one is the efficiency, managing scale, relying on cost cutting, and making more efficient, making organizations more lean and flexible. I mean, we've seen a great deal of layoffs in the pharmaceutical industry. Integration, the portfolio, this is the whole, again, the blockbuster model, the drug development model is actually shifting and changing. And then I think the point was made, the customer focus or orientation, aligning business less about the products, more around the customer. I mean, this is how the industry is continuing to evolve. The other big one is that, and it was touched on, blockbusters are falling off the patent cliff and fewer follow-ups are coming. So these are all products that are going to be losing exclusivity either by the end of this year or early next. And those combined with others, I mean, you're talking about $250 billion in lost sales. And I think the big thing here is, again, there are not a lot of follow-ups that are coming behind it. So, as we know, Lipitor is actually going off patent in the end of this month. And again, this is going to be a big blow. I mean, the Wall Street Journal called this the biggest blow to the chronic disease gravy train that pharma's enjoyed for all these years. And now that we see, saturated markets in cholesterol, depression, and hypertension or anti-hypertension, I mean, these were big, booming areas for pharma for a very long time, and now the FDA is commanding a lot more differentiation to move into these categories. Physicians are demanding more, because again, there's that generic equivalent that's out there, and how do you demonstrate a huge perceived benefit for that additional value? So this is a major market dynamic the industry is going to be dealing with. And because of that, one of the other things we're starting to see is that drug development is changing and focusing on niche markets. So here, this is an example. I mean, Pfizer's featured the niche blockbuster. We actually worked very closely with them to work on the brand for a new lung cancer therapy called Xalkori. But more and more companies, as personalized medicine becomes more and more critical, the development of oncology grows and expands. This is the direction the industry is going in. So what that means is, instead of targeting the masses with your Lipitor or blockbuster product, these are very targeted therapies to a very specific patient audience. That'll have an impact on how you ultimately market your products and brand, and the impact on the brand model itself. Another key trend are that patients are becoming more engaged and well-informed in their care. We have a more educated consumer, and we know in chronic disease states, advocacy groups, things like that, the patient cares more about their care and is becoming a bigger influencer in these areas. I mean, we talk a lot about patient opinion leaders now. Patients have a great deal of influence, just like a key opinion leader in the drug development timeline or program. And then this is not necessarily specific to our industry, but again, emerging markets are driving growth. The major growth is not going to come from the United States, it's not going to come from Europe or other established markets. The industry is now focusing on how do we get an impact or make an impact in emerging markets. So what does this ultimately mean for our brand model? Well, a couple of things. We talked about, or I talked about at the start of this, that historically, or the brand, is not a trademark. Brand is not a logo. The industry has historically used brands solely as a promotional tool. You can see here, brand is an extension of marketing. We figure out our business strategy, all the different disciplines follow. We develop our brand strategy, and it's a communication tool. Given these market dynamics, our philosophy at InterbrandHealth Health is that this thinking needs to evolve, and that your brand strategy is an organizing principle to drive the overall business strategy that influences all of your business function, whether it's marketing, sales, internal factors, how your employees behave, how they engage with customers. This is a major, major shift that we believe is necessary to succeed, given these market conditions. The other key piece is that it's really time to challenge that traditional brand model, where, again, we talked about it was primarily a product-based model. Now we're looking towards a model where the corporate brand and the product brands interplay with one another. And if you think about some of those factors that we talked about, so the reason we focus on a product-based model, risk mitigation, well, the explosion of information, there's no hiding the corporate brand anymore. I mean, Merck took a hit when Vioxx was recalled, so that's a fallacy at this point. There's no way to hide the corporate brand. Customer expectations, well, the marketplace is more educated. They're more choice empowered. They're more involved in their care. Efficacy and safety on its own are not going to cut it. When you think about other industries, issues like, or factors like corporate reputation can play a critical role in driving choice, having more of an experience with the customer, offering more services versus pushing product. And the third, target market efficiency. I mean, again, if you're marketing Lipitor to the masses, you can invest in that product. But when you're dealing with personalized care that hit a very small percentage of the population, there are greater efficiencies in elevating the brand story to a higher level, whether it's in a franchise. And I can tell you in the oncology space, product franchises have become almost table stakes. Pfizer's doing it, in the oncology group, GSK is doing it. It's elevating that discussion. So our point of view is that increasing visibility in the role of corporate value in our offerings is critical. So before, again, we had a very product-oriented value offering where products were really the key external piece, but there was a low relevance of other corporate attributes that other industries would typically emphasize. Where we believe it's actually moving is to more of a solutions-oriented value offering, where again, there's an interplay between the role of the product brand and the corporate brand. And I think it's kind of hard to see, but there were some things written there. Yeah. That's how things go sometimes. But again, the point here is to create more of an experience with the customers. It's not about just pushing products. It's about how do you engage with physicians, providers, or payers, as well as patients. And then the other key piece, or a very key dynamic, is the growth of the emerging markets. There are some statistics on this slide where you can see it, I hope you can see it in the back, that the data monitor predicts that the 2012 market size for the United States and North America is about 150 billion. Over here we have Europe and other established markets about 130. The number for emerging markets is about $235 billion. So this is where growth and opportunity is going to come from. And our point of view is that companies that have a strong corporate brand reputation outside the United States will have greater efficiencies and greater purchasing across the breadth of their portfolio. I mean, there's a very different brand dynamic in these emerging markets where there aren't a lot of product brands. There are issues around counterfeiting and the actual, the source of where the product is coming from. There are concerns there. So having a strong corporate brand can actually play a major role in driving choice in those particular markets. And the long-term implication of that is, if this is where the growth is going to come from, then getting behind a true global corporate brand, an organization can really drive forward its business performance. And this is where ultimate growth can come from. So what does this mean overall? I mean, one of the other big things that we're seeing is that some of our clients and companies within the healthcare space, the pharmaceutical industry, are beginning to really invest earlier in brand. So when we get involved in projects, very often at a product level, we can either be brought in to name a product, to develop the early positioning, to develop the core brand essence of it. What we're starting to see more and more of is that companies are beginning to invest in brand earlier. What does that mean? It means that metrics and measurement of return on that brand investment becomes more and more critical. I mean, we know pharma loves numbers, right? So if I'm going to invest all this money in a brand, what bang am I going to get for that buck? So one of the things that actually I've been heavily involved in is bringing some of the thinking from the brand valuation methodology that we talked about earlier this evening to our group and to the healthcare industry, and to begin really tracking and measuring the role of brand, whether it's in a particular therapeutic category or wider, and also the strength of brands. Again, the brand's ability to secure ongoing customer demand versus the competition. So this, again, represents a real opportunity in the space to begin really measuring the impact of these changes. So the key takeaways from tonight's conversation, 4 key reasons why brand is crucial to health and life sciences space. So number one, there's a different brand burden. We have complex audiences, we have a different brand model today, and our industry is highly regulated. The landscape is changing. There are a lot of changes that suggest we may need to shift our brand focus and change our brand model. One of the big points, and didn't touch on this too much, but we talked about the empowered consumer. Well, the conversation around your brands is taking place with or without pharma, with or without the healthcare industry anyway. So it's important to get behind it and or get in front of it and kind of control or be at least involved in the dialogue. And then ultimately, we see an evolving brand model where it's going to be less about product brands and more about the interplay between the product brand and ultimately the corporate brand. So what does this mean for all of you? I mean, for those of you students in the audience, I mean, it's a big opportunity. If you're interested in brand, if you understand brand, not a lot of people in the industry, at least today, get it. So that does represent a big opportunity. If you understand brand relationships, brand architecture, I mean, we're doing a ton of work in that area. I mean, the industry doesn't get it, but they need it. They need to understand how to organize the different brands, and there are huge opportunities in that area. So, yeah, I mean, it's a cool time. I mean, it's a cool time. I think we have a really big opportunity to kind of change the dynamic in the space. So that's what I have for you. Thank you so much. I will take questions, but thank you so much.
FDA has a very strong restriction on the brand. So can you talk about a little bit about FDA's opinion on this brand for pharmaceuticals?
Sure, yeah, I mean, in general, there are a number of rules with the FDA. I mean, I can speak about a few specific brand elements around, with brand names specifically, there are a lot of regulations around what you can and cannot say with a brand name. They're also highly concerned around confusion with different brand names. There are a host of restrictions on, whether or not how you promote. There's a whole division that, is there to just kind of slap the industry's hands called DMAC that just, really limits and engages with, or limits the industry and how they promote. So there are a lot of different areas within the FDA that really limit the ability of the industry to truly market the products correctly. I mean, one of the big areas is where the FDA does not have a clear point of view, and I'm not a subject matter expert on this at all, but in social media, I mean, the FDA just not gotten their act together at all, and they're for a while treating it like traditional media, which, as we all know, is a completely different dynamic. So, yeah, it's a big challenge.
Pharma companies have been demonized a great deal in the press and by politicians in the last 10 or 15 years. Some of that they brought on themselves with DTC advertising in the late 1990s. Why would they want to continue to raise the profile of the corporate brand?
I think there are opportunities. I mean, one of the things we've actually been involved in is, pharma's doing a lot of good things that they're not always getting credit about. I mean, we've actually worked, I don't know if anybody's familiar with Merck. Merck recently released a $500 million investment to impact women's mortality and childbirth. It's called Merck for Mothers. I think you're going to see a lot more where the industry realizes that corporate responsibility, things like that, are opportunities to kind of move away from the demonization, which you talked about. I mean, I think that's one thing that's really going to change things a little bit, and we'll see a big change there.
What is, you just mentioned Merck, and they're in a strong battle with a much smaller company, Vertex, right now in the HCV space. Can you talk about how the possible further leveraging of the corporate brand could change dynamics of startup companies versus larger companies that could have more resources that not necessarily bring to bear right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's an opportunity. I mean, I think Merck has a lot of resource and muscle where if they establish a relationship with physicians, different audiences, they can offer a lot more than a smaller player like Vertex potentially. They can lean on that and offer a different experience, different services, different engagement with physicians. So that would be a potential opportunity if, of course, they don't eventually swallow them up.
You talk about emerging markets. I'm very interested. A lot of our clients are focused on China. It's a big topic these days. I mean, it's such a different dynamic with heavy government control. When you go to clients and advise them, the whole concept of brand is a whole different dynamic when it comes to China. What do you have what are your keys to success as so many of these companies are trying to enter China?
Yeah, I think again, it's going to be more difficult to do it at the product level because there's just a host of issues at the product level with the IP, things like that. Again, I think it really comes down to establishing or investing in the brand at a corporate level. Pfizer or Merck or whoever it may be is going to have greater equity there, and I think that's where the investment makes the most sense. I mean, that would definitely be one watch out for success. Two more. Sure. Yeah, sure.
So as compounds are coming off patent, big pharma is moving into branded generics, where essentially it's price competition
great question. I mean, philosophically, I think what you can do is, and we haven't done any research on this, but this is just my point of view. I mean, I think there's an opportunity that, let's say Pfizer with Lipitor going off patent. Is there a demand driver, is there a driver in the market to say, well, I've been on Lipitor for 10 years, and it's gone off patent, and my insurance company won't cover it anymore. But let's say Pfizer develops a branded generic. Will there be a switch over there? And could Pfizer potentially command the price premium? Let's say it's a penny or 2 pennies more per pill, things like that. And there's equity that that product comes from Pfizer. Could be a big opportunity. I mean, you would have to figure out the price elasticity and understand if that actually is a driver to say, well, would I rather get my generic Lipitor from Pfizer from, let's say, Ranbaxy or things like that? And could Pfizer command the price premium? That's something that could potentially be explored. One more.
You guys actually participate in like naming of medication or product, and how do you do that?
That's a good question. It's actually our legacy business. So we started out as a naming company. It's more involved than you think, that's all I'll say. It's not a back of the napkin type thing. But no, the FDA does a lot of, actually FDA and global regulatory bodies really examine the confusability of names and things like that. So there's a lot of, it's a very involved process. Thank you so much. It's a lot of fun.